This is Emperor Saturn on the Imperial Voice, bringing you the Imperial Truth. Today I'm going to talk about how to start a revolutionary government. This is actually something you can do. Seems a little wild. What's the point of doing that? Is it just a role-playing game? Well, it can start as that, but maybe it's like a joke that if you keep it up, turns real. Or a role-playing game that if you keep playing it, becomes a government. So, how does this work? Why would you even do this? This is ridiculous. And what's funny about this is if you're forming a legislature, you can just do it right now. You know, some people say, oh, you can't just really form some kind of big thing out of just a meeting of a few people. But, I mean, that's how a lot of things in life started. That's kind of how the International Workers Association, the first international started, I think. It's kind of how the Black Panther Party started, too. It's actually how everything in life starts, except there are instances in history of revolutionary governments being break-offs from the old governments. And the Enlightenment revolutions are great examples of this. And certain anti-colonial revolutions have this, too. But in some cases, these parallel governments are actually self-initiated from scratch by the revolutionary movement, whether they take the form of a party movement or literally just the direct construction of a legislature from just whoever is deemed to be, fitting for it. And who deems it? Well, now I'm going to tell you how to, start a revolutionary government. Is it one word or two words? You tell me. But the key is self-appointment. Can you believe that? These things actually start from self-appointment. People who believe in a certain kind of revolution get together and say, we are forming a provisional government or a legislative council or something like that, or a revolutionary legislature. They appoint themselves to it. They don't expect to stay in power forever because, they're trying to be democratic, well, in some cases. And so the whole idea is you install yourself in power as a revolutionary provisional government, and then you have elections between 6 to 18 months later to actually replace yourself with people who are actually elected instead of self-appointed. So it's a transitional government, a provisional government, a revolutionary government. But it's not meant to last forever. It can begin to be the nucleus. I mean, I suppose some people in that could run for re-election, or sometimes they have a self-excluding law to prevent that. But what's interesting is you actually can just appoint yourself. And I'm sort of starting to do this. It's something called the Revolution Committee. We have a RPG, Revolutionary Provisional Government, which sort of does work like a role-playing game. So this sounds completely out of touch with reality. It sounds like, just a room of people declaring themselves a new government? And I guess the joke really here would be that any random room of people would be a better government than United States Congress. So, I mean, once you realize that, you realize, okay, maybe there's something to this whole thing. But you can't just, I'm experimenting with just going into various Facebook groups based on memes and humor and proposing that those groups themselves declare themselves a revolutionary provisional government based on democratic socialism in opposition to United States Congress, with our decisions and laws becoming effective upon our installation into power. And I've proposed this exact proposal to multiple meme groups. And, just planting some seeds, seeing which groups emerge. And, after that, I propose things like, what should our first initial measures be upon coming to power? And they can be sweeping things like an economic bill of rights, or turning the, commanding heights of the economy into public utilities, or workers' democracy in the workplace, or more direct democracy, abolish the electoral college, blah, 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 So, how do you do this revolutionary government? So really you need two components to start a revolutionary government, because it just seems completely detached from reality if all you do is form a revolutionary legislature. So the other part of the formula or equation to this is having a revolutionary movement organization that calls street actions. Except those street actions are different than most ordinary liberal or reform-oriented street actions. A lot of street actions in Western politics revolve around a particular single-issue demand, or a protest against a certain politician, or a rally in favor of a certain politician. This is what most street actions are. However, what precedes a lot of revolutions, in modern history especially, are what are simply called anti-government protests. And I don't mean the full anarchist sense of being anti-government as a concept. I mean anti the current government. So what does that mean? In like Arab Spring and Eastern European revolutions and others, globally, against dictatorships or monarchies or just corrupt oligarchies or governments built on stolen elections, the slogan that really gets the job done is, people demand removal of the regime. You have a big banner that helped start the Egyptian revolution, which also started over Facebook, so that's important. And I think the World Trade Organization protest started over the internet as well. Anyway, so you have these protests that focus specifically on removing the current government. Now, in dictatorships, you can just say people demand removal of the regime. In America, you have to be a bit more specific. It's because, these tactics were designed against dictatorships, but they are used against corrupt governments, and ours certainly is. And, you don't have to stretch anything too far to simply assert that. So you can I made a banner recently. One of the sides of it says, disband Congress, install a new government. And you can just chant that. That can be the slogan. And just a demand like that, like disband Congress or remove Congress or arrest Congress or derecognize Congress is the most insidious one, because you don't have to do anything to Congress other than say that you don't think of it as the government anymore and just spread that idea. That's dangerous. But it's a little too mimetic. It's not concrete enough. Like, you have to say, like, okay, they're done, right? We're going to disband them. How do we do that? Maybe by getting them arrested and hauled out of the chamber. Maybe just by removal through enough popular uprising that they abdicate. Something like that. Anti-government protests combined with directly constructing a revolutionary provisional government, a revolutionary provisional legislature. So now that you got these protests saying down with the government, up with the new one, right? Whatever kind of system it is, down with Congress, long live the parliament, a revolutionary parliament maybe, or down with Congress, install a new government, something like that. So you've got these street actions. You've got a organization that dedicates itself to doing just these, and that's the point of it. No other demands really central. You can say, oh yeah, we also support universal health care or this or that. Yeah, of course, why wouldn't you? But that's not the main focus. The main focus has to literally be an anti-government protest. and when you actually think it over and you think like all the major revolutions around the world, you're like, whoa, this is actually the exact thing that led to the downfall of all these different governments. But, they don't want you to know this because they don't want you to overthrow them. So what do you do with this revolutionary legislature? It's like, okay, now we're getting into the deep trippy zone where we're just declaring ourselves a government. LARP city. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of like that. But the thing of it is, when you connect it with street actions, then it gains the element of reality to it, of political reality. However, you could just call it a role-playing game just to have fun, but, you don't have to. The thing of it is, these revolutionary provisional governments, you got to start out actually aspiring to get better at parliamentary procedure. You can use a bare bones, just voting system of majority vote, greater than 50% equals pass, just wrap up deliberations when most of the people in the group are done deliberating, keep conversation from telescoping and spiraling and bring things to a majority vote. And what you do is you actually legislate the laws you believe ought to exist. What's the point of that? Okay, so you legislate these laws you believe ought to exist, and if those laws resonate with things people need, and people are motivated to join your street actions and support the movement and support your installation into power. So, obviously, you could just rip off Bernie Sanders' entire program, platform, or whatever, and just make that the I think my revolutionary government already voted to do that as a minimum. Like, at minimum, we're going to do everything Bernie promised. At minimum. Yeah. So, yeah, just declare yourselves, a revolutionary government on that platform with that mandate to power. And you'd get a lot of support. And, that's kind of the basis I'm building on. And so these street actions, you combine them with the revolutionary government. The point is, people are like, okay, well, how does that translate into, like, actually, you've got some protests and you've got this little role-play legislature, now what? Think of it is, if you're dealing with a deeply unpopular government, like United States Congress, which hovers at around a 20% approval rating, even a very small group holding very small actions is very capable of gaining up a lot of snowball momentum very quickly, especially in a crisis or revolutionary situation, which, hey, I mean, we're looking at another recession. We're looking at an election that people won't consider legitimate because of the virus. Now, what am I recommending to people? I don't really think we should do any of this kind of street action stuff until the quarantine lifts. If the government tries to manipulate the quarantine to politically contain protests, then we should defy the quarantine. But we should not defy the quarantine before it actually makes sense to do so. I don't think we should be conspiracy theorists. I think we should actually respect the quarantine as long as it seems medically necessary to respect it. And that could be a minute. So, what do we do in the meantime? We start spreading these concepts, organizing teams to throw street actions in various cities, so that when the quarantine lifts, we are ready to roll with a national day of action, demanding the disbandment of United States Congress. So we have a few months to just organize that online. We have time. That's good. And it sucks because, quarantine is bad. It's not pleasant. People are dying. It's not good. But this is not the time for street action. Not at all. So what we need to do, one thing we can do is work on our revolutionary legislatures, our parallel governments, and build them up. And a simple mechanism that I've utilized to help advance them is a rotation system where every day I just tag or poke or remind a new person, hey, it's your turn to make a proposal. Propose the law that you believe should exist in America or wherever you live. And it can be silly or serious. There's definitely an element of humor to a parallel government declaring itself out of nothing. If you weren't laughing at it, you'd lose your mind because it's it's so daunting a task. But it also is weirdly powerful. So it's definitely in the area of the weird and the humorous. So, yeah. So you just keep voting, you keep legislating, you keep convening, you keep holding street actions. They grow over time, and then what happens? Well, if they snowball, which they do, you can do this in 2 or 3 years. If you start now, in 2 or 3 years, you could overthrow a government. This is pretty consistent. There's a movie called How to Start a Revolution. It's a documentary about Gene Sharp. There are free versions on YouTube. And his book, From Dictatorship to Democracy, pretty much informs this strategy, where you have this thing called state pillars. These are government agencies or bureaucracies or the police or the military or the media. And what happens in many of these revolutions is the crushing weight of mass protest, especially given that a lot of people experience and feel and identify the things that the protesters are raising, whether it's hating a dictatorship or hating, this economy or things like that, actually begin to realign. You have units and agencies begin to defect from the old system to the revolution. And so what this means in practice is the formation of a new government. This is why it's good to have a parallel government already in place. So there's a committee that these people are working with. When they decide to defect to the revolution, they can say, oh, what do we do? Do you have anything that we need to do to help the revolution? Or should we just flail around? You can say, no, here's the plan. Here's how you can help. So you need something like that in place. And that's part of the role of a parallel government, that as government agencies or pieces of the government begin to defect from the old regime to the new one, to the revolution, you need someone there to catch them when they jump, to say, all right, we're integrating you into a new system. So yeah, we're not really trying to smash most of the state. It's a distinct difference between government and state. The government is really the seat of power. It's the lawmaking apparatus, the lawmaking legislature, the center of policy. Whereas most of the agencies, they make policy to an extent, but at least formally, their job is to carry out the policies of Congress or the president, or both. So the government is really the seat of government, which is like Congress, the three branches, executive, judiciary. So that's what you got to remove. But we're not making a war against the Department of Labor. We want the Department of Labor to join the revolution, right? We want the Congressional Budget Office to become like the Revolutionary Budget Office, Yeah. So, and we want most security forces to jump over to our side too. Why? Well, because it's easier to get them to join us than it is to fight them physically. It is. I mean, I don't mean to brag, but as someone who's, been in the mix of it with like Antifa nonsense, yeah, I'd rather just win over the state than like try to take it on head on. Like, it's just true. You can't really beat the state in a head on fight in a highly modernized country with a highly modernized military. So, I mean, things have evolved. However, the good thing is it's sort of like a political jujitsu where you can actually use the system against itself, where these different components of the state don't have absolute loyalty to the government, might be happy to join over to a new one. And so rather than attacking the whole state, you focus on the government, you focus on the legislature, Congress, and demand the removal, disbandment, derecognition, or arrest of Congress, along with, the affiliated executive and judiciary branches. And all the other state forces, they're welcome to be part of the revolution, and actually we want them to be. I mean, we try to use crowd pressure and encouragement and persuasion to win them over to join what we're doing. So I guess the three central concepts really are, anti-government protests, directly constructing a revolutionary legislature, and winning over the state departments and security forces. So that's the main thing. And I guess, if you're like, okay, yeah, but what are we doing as a revolutionary legislature? Just continue legislating and continue practicing your Robert's rules. And I have a stripped down, reduced version of them, which is helpful for just making things work. Because Robert's rules is more than I would expect any ordinary person to actually follow. And I'm not trying to create like a new legalese jargon legal system, So, yeah, but, even basic parliamentary procedure takes a little bit of practice, a little bit of know-how, not much. Just try it out and, learn by doing, you get into it. So, yeah, a little bit of parliamentary procedure, some street actions, a little imagination, a little strategy. You can overthrow any government on planet Earth. It's pretty astounding. You can escalate with civil disobedience. This actually does generate more disruption. If you really want to go whole hog, eventually it can turn to rioting, but that can backfire on you, as that gives the existing government a pretext to say that you are, a force of disorder and call upon the various security forces to crack down on you. If you can pull it off, remaining nonviolent actually can win the security forces over to your side. So instead of fighting the cops, we can have them arrest Congress. We can have them arrest Wall Street. I'd rather that. I don't feel like fighting cops. I feel like watching them, make all the powers that be do the perp walk. That would be fun. I'm sure there would be a lot of, red-blooded officers on the force who would just be happy to literally just watch us guillotine the whole ruling class. And, they'd laugh about it and, say, hey, this is the job I've always wanted to do. So, I mean, are there issues with policing? Yeah. Which is why, you rotate in a citizen security force, a citizen security safety patrol. But, that goes without saying, I think. But, if it doesn't, well, I just said it. So that's really the plan. That's how you start a revolutionary government. You just do it. You just declare, you get some friends together. Any room of people would be a better government than Congress. You start legislating the laws you believe ought to exist. You build street actions calling for the removal of the current government and the installation of yours. You build them up over time, but not too much time, 2 or 3 years, and then they snowball big enough to start winning over state agencies from Congress to the revolution. Then when you win over enough of them, build the protest big enough, you win. Congratulations. That's how you start a revolutionary government. That's how you overthrow any regime. A lot of this started from when I was reading Revolutionary Strategy by Mike McNair of the Communist Party of Great Britain, which is kind of misnamed as a party, though not precisely. Most people think communist, they think of Stalinist, they think of authoritarian communist. The Communist Party of Great Britain has actually gone in the direction of being what they call neo-Trotskyist, or perhaps revolutionary Trotskyist. Interesting. So Trotsky was this interesting theorist who tried to bridge this sort of gap between reform and revolution. I bring this up not because I really wish to bridge reform and revolution in any way anymore, except a little. Some reforms are cool, but the thing of it is, I'm looking more towards immediate revolution these days. And what's interesting is that Mike McNair proposes a theory of socialism and how the state is structured under socialism that is different than the typical Leninist form of revolutionary socialism, or at least the Trotskyist form, which says that basically the only form of socialism is like a mass mutiny of, workplace uprisings where workers take over their workplaces in a big wave and establish workers' democracy and either elect their own managers or just run things by voting and occupy their workplaces, throw out hostile bosses, and and that there's just a wave of these things. And they do historically happen. The USA has never had them, but other countries have. Russia had them. France in 1968 had them. Russia, the Russian Revolution, 1917. And there's a whole list of countries like Iran, Portugal, Chile, I believe. Maybe it was Argentina. That's rude of me. Let me see. I believe it was... No, I got it right the first time. Chile. Poland, of course. Long list. But those are just some of the most shining examples. There are many others like... Workers' control. We got... I don't know. Let me see the table of contents of this book. You got some factory occupations in Britain. You got some in Italy. Got some in places like Indonesia, Algeria. Oh yeah, Argentina. Okay, I wasn't wrong. A little bit in Venezuela. India had some. Then we got Yugoslavia. Yeah, okay, so there's two main books. One is called Ours to Master and to Own, which I have not yet read, and apparently that's the one that has the more pessimistic examples. And then there's Revolutionary Rehearsals, which I have read. So, however, the critique of these workers' councils by the Communist Party of Great Britain is that they're very short-lived. They are short-lived in terms of their mass participation. They only really flare up during moments of mass rebellion or revolution, and afterwards they don't form a very stable basis for any kind of actual political structure. After the mass uprising, they seem to devolve into something like a town hall, like a city council, which is like, except in a workplace. And, city councils, sometimes they have meetings where like literally only the city council and maybe a handful of observers are in attendance. And that's kind of what the workers' councils devolve into over time. And that's okay. It's just, it's good. In socialism, you need those to be there. But to form the government as a federation out of them doesn't seem wise, because the mass participation really does dive down over time, like pretty quickly. I believe the terminology that Mike McNair used was that they are organs of struggle rather than organs of governance. And I tend to be leaning towards that perspective more and more. However, what do you do instead? And I think Mike McNair's answer, if I understand properly, was that you simply form a representative legislature, except one that excludes supporters of capitalism, which sounds dictatorial and demonic and undemocratic until you realize there's historic precedent for this, because it's a tolerance paradox. In American revolutionary times, they threw the loyalists out of their governing bodies. They threw the Confederates out during the Civil War. You had plenty of purges during the French Revolution, though those are they get dubious at times. And the English Civil War, you had the loyalists to the monarchy get thrown out of Parliament, things like that. And it's okay. It's something you got to do, or else everything you're fighting for will, it'll just revert to the old system if you allow the representatives of the old system into your legislature or your government. So what do? You really just need a representative legislature that defends the right of the workers' councils to manage in the workplace, while holding political power as a traditional representative legislature. That's really the thing you gotta have. This is Emperor Saturn of the Imperial Voice, bringing you the Imperial Truth. Signing off.